Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Coach Dustin, and honestly, we are in for a treat today. We have someone that was pretty pivotal and he didn't even know it around the Balanced Business Dad movement, and I'll explain why when we get into that. But first, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our guest today, Mr. Shaun McCloskey. Shaun, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so I'm super excited, and I'm just going to go out and say it, and then I want to hear your story and kind of, all the wisdom you have. But when we were creating the Balanced Business Dad, there was people we were looking for that we knew that we like to model, and we came up with the Balanced Business Dad with 6 pillars of that we think kind of encompass everything, and those start with faith, health, marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and then business in that order. I've coached a lot of people where
Awesome.
business was above everything else,
Yeah.
above your faith, above your health, above your marriage. And that obviously we know doesn't work. And I'm not going to say everything's always rosy for you. And yet I feel like you have those pillars in order a lot of times and are always working on making those pillars and being better tomorrow than you are today in all of those pillars. And I've always looked up to you for that. So no, you are what we consider the Balanced Business Dad. So thank you for that. And you had no idea.
Well, that's a pretty tall order to stand up to. And I will say it is a constant struggle and it's not easy at all. And there's times when I fall way short of all of that. And then there's other times I feel like I got it pretty good.
Right.
But yeah, I'm happy to share what I've seen. I've been coaching for a long time too now. So I've seen
Yeah.
patterns in what other people have done and not done too. So I learn just as much from them oftentimes as they do from me. So it's a constant struggle. It's a constant learning and a constant readjusting from being out of balance in all those areas. So I
Yeah.
don't have it. I don't have it all figured out. Let me make that perfectly clear. But
Correct.
hopefully I
Correct.
can share a couple things that'll at least help.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's just go ahead and start kind of, where you are today. And then how did you get to this place you're at in life?
Are you talking about life, business, all of the
I like
above?
to encompass both of them. So yeah, kind of all of the above.
Well, so I've been married now 19 years. I have 3 kids at home, 15, 13, and just turned 11. And I've got a business called Leadership Boardroom and coach a lot of high-level business owners, trying to help them figure out how to have a vision for their life and a vision for their business. And a third component that I didn't start teaching until a couple of years ago, a vision for what they want their role to be in the business. And then sort of marrying all 3 of those together. That obviously encompasses a lot of different things. Like you said,
Right.
there's health and there's family and there's hobbies and there's interests, and there's charitable things and there's whatever legacy you want to leave. And there's, my gosh, it consists of so many different components. So it's not easy, number one, to figure out what any of that stuff is because we're not taught this in school. And then number two, the execution of it's like, you know, as Jordan Peterson says, good luck with that.
Yes,
There's a
exactly.
lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
And so I try to help people figure out first what it even is, because most people have some general ideas as to what these things look like, but very few people have taken the time to really investigate and dive deep and then get it out of their head and get it in writing. And then even fewer that have done that look at it and plan their week with it in mind. So, and that's a series of habits and disciplines that's not easy to stay on top of, if you will, because there's so many moving parts to it.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look back at your life at any given point, sometimes there's points where the business is going great and family life's suffering and taking a back seat, or
Mhm.
maybe family's going really great and you're traveling and you're doing all the fun stuff and health takes a back seat because it's easy to eat a lot on vacation, and
Yes, it
and
is.
so
Yes, it is.
it's a constant look at what do you want to be important to you in life and figuring out how to, number one, figure out what that is and how to prioritize it and then how to pull it off. So,
And I love that. How did that come about in your life? And let alone then you start teaching that to others? Because I am definitely a student. I've been a student of Sean's for a long time. I've been a part of the boardroom and I've worked on my vision from that. But where did this all start? I don't think one day you just said, hey, I'm going to start teaching this stuff.
yeah, no, you have to screw everything up first in order
Oh,
and
there you go.
become massively humbled and work 80 hours a week. And I wouldn't say hate your life, but you almost have to get to a point see, look, this is a message that the 20-year-olds don't want to hear it. because they go,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be that stupid. I'm not going to do stuff like that. And then, you start getting up in the 30s and mid 30s and 40s and 50s, and you've tried everything that you can try certain kinds of ways, and you've screwed it all up. And eventually you go, okay, what I was trying isn't exactly working. And so I didn't have the luxury of learning this stuff from, certainly not from school, certainly not from my parents. And I don't know about you, man, but there's not easily ready environments where people are teaching how to have a life. It's like, the popular
Yeah.
message on Facebook today and social media and all the avenues is work your face off,
Yeah.
get rich, all your problems will be fixed once you are. But I started a real estate business back in 2003, and within about 3 years I was doing 70, 80 house flips a year.
Which
And
is
so people,
huge.
yeah, I mean, to me, I know people doing way more than that now, but one of
Yeah.
my top students did 800 last year.
Gosh.
But to me, 80 in a year is like, I
Yeah.
was busting my butt to get that
Yeah.
much done. And I was following the advice of mentors that I had. But I was working like a dog, man.
Mhm.
And, this was right as I was starting to consider having kids. It was right when my marriage was starting out. And, I justified it because my wife and I worked together. So we got to spend all the time in the world together, but we were working most of the time.
Yeah.
And so you do that for a little while. And then I get a phone call from the guy who taught me how to do all this one day, who was in the process of, his wife left him that day.
Mm.
By the way, same day that he made, I believe it was either 850 or $900,000 that day. So he said it was the best and worst day of his life. And he's been teaching me how to run my business for the last 2 years. I paid him a lot of money to do that. And I'm following in his exact footsteps. And he's got no relationship with his wife. His kids now disowned him, and they don't want relationships with him because work was his master. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, I'm following this guy. I'm doing everything he's telling me to do, and I'm on the same path. So, and I was. And so, I remember one day sitting on my front porch. I had just closed a deal. You probably know this story. I've shared this at my events. I had
Mhm.
just closed a deal, made $105,000 on this one deal. And I was in the crappiest mood ever. And my wife's like, what's your deal? Did we not close the deal today? What's going on? I'm like, no, we closed it and we made 105 grand. And also my expenses were so high at that point. We had to spend 35 grandish a month just to open the doors. So here I made more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. I should be ecstatic, and yet I'm miserable. I probably worked 90 hours that week. I just bought myself, according to my expenses, I bought myself 3 whopping months of freedom with the single biggest deal I'd ever done in my life. And, I hit a low point. And that in that moment, I cried out to God, because I think that's what it takes sometimes to actually acknowledge his presence and go, hey, what are
Mhm.
you doing here? What's the purpose of all of this stuff?
Right.
And, the story goes from there. But I literally opened up my Bible and I said, you better show me something good. I don't recommend you talking to God this way, but this is why I did that because I was angry. And it turned to Ecclesiastes, which if you ever read that, it's a book written by Solomon, which was the wealthiest man on earth. He had more women than you could possibly fathom, more land, more cattle, more everything. He had everything that everyone says they want on earth. And the whole premise of that chapter was, this too is meaningless. He's like, I've had this, it's meaningless. I've had this, it's meaningless. I've had this, it's meaningless. And I sat there on my front porch and I bawled because I was like, this is everything that I've been pursuing, and all of it's meaningless. And so what is meaningful?
Wow.
And that began this whole new journey of, okay, if you're going to have a meaningful life, what does that look like? And I'm not here to tell anybody what your meaningful life
Of
looks
course.
like for you. You get to decide that on your own, but at least decide it. At least start to figure that out and ask those questions. Because if you don't, you wake up one day and you go, is this all there is? Or, I put my ladder up against the wrong wall, and, I got to the top of the ladder and it's the wrong dang wall. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what this is about. It's like asking difficult questions and figuring out, what do you want that to look like? And, and then the pursuit of it gives you a noble and worthwhile cause worth waking up for.
Mm. I love that. There's so much to unpack there. But first, what I really got out of there is make sure you know who you're taking advice from.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know that gentleman, but could have been the greatest real estate investing coach in the world.
Yeah.
get, if you want more out of life than just that thing you're hiring that mentor or that consultant to do, make sure you ask their questions, right? Kind
Oh
of in the
yeah,
whole pillars of things. Make sure you're taking advice from who you're wanting to take advice from. So that's huge. And there's a lot of gurus out there. And, I'm very transparent when I start coaching people. I want them to have my whole story, because if they don't agree with something in my story, then I'm not going to be the right fit for them, and they're not the right fit for me.
for
So
sure.
make sure you know who you're taking advice from. That's big. And
Well,
then,
and especially if you're modeling an entire set of something from them, it's like,
yeah,
how did they get to that point? What does their life really look like? That doesn't mean you can't learn something from everyone. But if
right,
you're going to model someone's entire model, you better find out, does that model give them the life that you're pursuing? Because most of the time you're going to find that it's not. And actually there's so much fluff out there today that if you're comparing what your life looks like to somebody whose life is on Facebook, or they're at the front of the room, or they're selling the coaching program, they don't always disclose everything. And I think
right.
that's human nature. So I'm not
Of
faulting them.
course.
Everybody wants to put their best foot forward, but the reality is that when you dig in a little bit, and I coach people now. I mean, my top client is worth $500 million. And if you look at him from the outside, now don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but if you look at him from the outside, there's things that he's done that I would certainly model, but there's definitely things that I would not at all. And that goes the same for everybody. Same with me. I mean,
Right. Mhm.
people come to me for coaching, and I'm like, "Hey, all right, here's where I can coach you. And this is where I've got some great experience in these areas over here. I'm not your guy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So if we get down to the nuts and bolts of kind of why I thought you were the balanced business dad, right? So I've heard your journey of faith and how you've done that. You've kind of had a health journey in the last couple of years. You were 100% integral in my journey. When I lost the weight, and that is still a journey for me. But how does, with the faith, the health, the marriage, being a father, being a friend, because you definitely play a lot, which I love, and then your business, how are you able to prioritize those? Because not a lot of guys that I've talked to can do that in such a way that you have. What are some of your tips, tricks to really intertwine all six of them and keep them kind of growing and progressing at the same time?
All right. Well, again, some of this always feels weird to me because you make it sound like I have it all figured out, and that's not entirely true. I still
Sure.
struggle with this stuff, and the
Yeah.
reality is, man, this is a discipline that it takes weekly and daily effort, and I have periods of time where I do really, really well with it, and then I have periods of time where I teach this stuff and I fall off of it. So let's start with
Of
that.
course. Yeah.
So the first thing I would suggest is you got to start with that vision document. And a vision is not just a one sentence little structure that you put together and put on your wall. It is it's a complete description of, if life could look any way you wanted it to look in a handful of areas, how would you want it to look? And a lot of people struggle with this to even get started because they have I don't deserve it issues, or
Mm.
I don't see it being attainable issues, or all kinds of filters that show up. My parents want me to do this, or my wife wants me to go this direction, or I can't do that because I have kids or I have responsibilities. So it's very easy to filter what you want even your vision to look like with outside circumstances.
Yeah.
And what people find is that of course there are circumstances that are outside of your control, but more is in control than you think. And so, but you got to have the courage to sit down and get some of this stuff out of your head and spend the time to do it. Now, when I first started with this, I didn't know how to do this the way that I did now, and it took me about 6 months of sitting down somewhat regularly. This isn't something I spent 8 hours a day on for 6 months. It's like when I had a thought, I would pull out my phone and I'd say, man, let's just say travel, for example, that one tends to be easier for a lot of people. If I could travel anywhere, where would I want to go? And I would start to write stuff, man, I've always wanted to go check out the pyramids, or I want to check this out, or,
Mhm.
start to get some of that stuff out of your head. But that can also be, man, if I was the father that I really wanted to be, what would that look like? What would me and my kids do for fun? We have a we have a fun vision just for the family where we can literally go to that vision on a weekend when we're bored and can't think of anything to do. And there's 50 things on the list. Well, we could go for a bike ride. We could go for a walk. We could go explore the woods. We could go look for frogs. We could go to Kids Zone and jump on the trampolines. We could do, but it's the start of, those are easy ones, by the way, because those are all things to do. The
Right.
hard ones are who you want to become, or what you want to experience, or how you want to impact other people. And but there's, 10 or 11 different categories for personal, and then there's business. And so you start figuring out what that looks like. That's first. And so I have this little wheel of life and a wheel of business that I'll share with you. You're welcome to give to your people if you want to.
Yes,
But the
please.
the wheel of life is basically, um, it's a little wheel, and it's got 10 different categories on it, and you rate yourself. In the center of the wheel is a 0, and on the outside is a 10. And so you rate yourself on a 0 to 10 scale, and you see how round is your wheel. And most people
Mm,
find that, maybe their business is going really well and family's going really well, and their health is at a 0, right? And you can see that the wheel gets real janky pretty fast. And the solution today for what we see on social media is to just go faster. It's like, you got a janky wheel, man. You can go 5, 10 miles an hour with a janky wheel. Try going 150 miles an hour. Everything falls apart. And
yeah.
so, the idea is never to have a perfectly balanced life at all times. It's to say, okay, if my health was at a 0, let's say, what does a 10 even look like? Do you even know? And
Mm,
now take somebody who is significantly unhealthy. And they might go, I can't even think of what a 10 looks like because I'll never have that. They start to filter with what they believe is possible. But if I start asking questions and digging deep, I find out that a 10 for them would be, I would actually figure out ways to be healthy that I enjoyed. I would find foods that I actually liked that were also healthy. I don't know any of those right now. I don't know any exercise that I actually like doing. I don't know, to me, it seems like a big burden and a hassle. But if I could have in any way, here's how I would look, here's how it would feel, here's how I would enjoy different types of food, and they start to dream just a little bit. And actually going from a 0 to a 10 might be dreaming too far. We might have to start people with like dreaming from a 0 to a 3, or 2, just to get them
yeah.
started. But we do that in all these different categories. And then so you say, well, how do you pull it all off? Well, you don't pull it all off at once. You pick maybe 2 or 3 categories to get started on. And then as you're planning your week, you say, okay, what's just 1 or 2 things I can do this week to get me to go from, let's say, a 0 in health to a 1? What's just a couple things? You're not going to say, I'm going to start running a marathon by tomorrow afternoon. You're going to say, this week, here's what I know I can do. I'm not going to have a soda at lunch. I always have a soda for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm just going to cut one out at lunch. And you make small little incremental, um, little steps forward, and pretty soon you add that up over the course of a year, and you've made massive, massive progress. Now
I love that.
I'm digesting this down about as 300,000 foot view as you can get, but
Sure.
you kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah.
You're not going to fix all 10 of these categories at once. But you can make small little incremental changes, but it requires you to think. And most people don't want to do that. It requires you to have a little bit of a plan. It requires you to look at your vision once a week.
Mm,
You don't even have to sit here and work on it for 8 hours today. But at the beginning of each week, if you can get into the discipline of looking at that and saying, what are 2 or 3 things that I can do this week to move that needle forward just a little bit? And you add that up over time, man, big changes start to happen.
I
It
love
doesn't
that.
happen overnight, but it does start to happen.
Man, that is that's sound advice. I've obviously been I've been doing this vision work since 2020, since I first went to one of your events. So and the how rewarding it is pretty amazing. So I love that. And I hope all the dads please go back and re-listen to what Shaun just said, because it can be those things that start moving you down this path. There was a question you said at the 2020 event, and it's threw me off because I had never heard someone say it before. And
Huh.
it was, do your goals match your vision?
Yeah.
Right, because I had all these goals about making money, and so I'm a real estate agent and an investor and a coach. So, and I even put traditional like listings on there because it was easy money for me to make. I can
Yep.
go sell a house as an agent with not a ton of effort, so I put that on there. And then when you ask that question, I had nowhere in my vision was to list houses ever again.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm making this goal over here to go do these things that I really didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So it was pretty mind blowing because I never heard someone ask that question before. So I love that. So
People, by the way,
Shaun,
they get offended when I when sometimes I'll use some colorful language just to, spark people a little bit. And I say, "Oh, so you're doing something that you don't want to do for money?" And they go, "Yeah." And I say, "You know who else does that? Prostitutes.
Yeah,
They don't want to do what they're doing, but the money's really good. And so they do something they don't want to do for the money. So is that what you want?" Like, you know, and I get it. Sometimes you got to make ends meet and do something
sure.
you don't want for a little while so you can not starve to death.
Yeah,
But is that your long-term plan?
right.
And and then people are setting goals. If you're setting a goal where the finances are your top priority, look, everybody wants to make more money. Everybody
Sure.
wants to, for the most part. Actually, that's not entirely true. Some people don't care. Most people want to
Right.
make more money than they're currently making, right? Um, but if you're willing to do anything to get it, I promise you the money's not fulfilling either.
Right.
And you know, it's a whole lot more rewarding for you to honor your God-given gifts, the things that you really enjoy to that impresses me more than just making money. How did you make it? Did you
Yeah.
sell your soul to the devil to make it? Or did you make it in a way that honors your areas of gifting and you enjoyed the process? You had a blast and you learned a lot. And you did all the things that, you know, are growing you into the man that you're trying to become. That's impressive to me.
Yeah.
Anybody can go out and work 100 hours a week and make more money. That doesn't impress me anymore. It ruins too
Yeah.
many people's lives.
Yeah.
So when goal setting is the number one thing and it comes before vision, that's the stuff you'll do. So it's a top down approach. It really starts with what's your purpose here on earth? That's a pretty loaded question for another time. Right underneath that is what's the vision for your life? And after you figure that out, now you can set goals. If you're starting with goal setting, it does not work. Which, by the way, this is why 93% of New Year's resolutions are already failed by January 31st. 93. That's according to Inc. magazine, not me. So 93%. Why is that? Because somebody started with a goal. There's no vision in mind for what they're really hoping to accomplish with it. They have a goal. They don't see a vision bright enough to attain the goal. So by January 31st, they quit. It's typical. Happens all the time.
So typical. Yeah. Wow. Real quick, second to last question. Because you run this pretty amazing organization around coaching and masterminds. What what can coaching, having a coach, or being in a mastermind, or both, do for the business dads out there? For people who have never, I've been blessed with, I've experienced it for a long time now,
Yeah.
but I realize there's a lot of people who don't have this coaching mastermind world. So talk just a second on what coaching and masterminds can do for a business dad.
Yeah. I think a couple things. First, I'm going to separate the two because I think both are important. And then when you combine the two, it's pretty amazing too. But let's take coaching first. So think of, and I'll ask you,
Yeah.
think of somebody that you had as I don't know, at some point in your life. It could have been any type of coach, a sports coach, a musical coach. It could be just a good teacher that you had in school, somebody like that. And I want you to think of
Yeah.
one person specifically.
Got it.
Okay, got somebody in your head?
I do. It
Who was it?
was Chuck.
Chuck? All
Yeah.
right. So give me some characteristics of Chuck. Why was he a good coach? What were some of
Um,
his attributes?
Empathy for sure.
Okay.
Like I felt like he understood me, even though the path I was going down, he was not going down.
Yep.
Uh, he was an absolute hard ass. Like he would ask
Yeah.
these questions that would just, I mean, strike me and pierce me, right?
Okay.
But no one else had ever asked me that question before. And I'm probably gonna get
Okay.
teary eyed. You know that story. Um, but yeah, it's that. He was always there for me. He was available. He was transparent. He wasn't trying to be someone that he wasn't.
Yeah.
And he was just there to help me on whatever I wanted help with,
Yep.
and pushed me along with what I wanted. I think
Yeah.
that's when I think of that. And he did it, and he did it amazingly.
Hone in a little bit more. You said he was hard on you. What does that look like? He was a jerk?
So a lot of people would have took that as a jerk, but
Yeah.
I took it as love. And when I say that, he asked these questions that no one had ever asked me. And one of his questions, I'll just say it, was, that seems like a pretty uneventful, boring life. He just flat out said that to me.
That's more of a statement.
Well, yeah, there was a question mark behind it, but
Right.
yeah, and just so when I mean the hard ass, it was just these questions would come out of it. No one else would, honestly, I even think, have the guts to ask questions like he asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he just didn't care. He cared more about me than he cared about our relationship. And
Wow.
yeah, and I have another coach that says that, but I loved that because he truly cared more about me than how I felt about him.
Yes.
And that was huge. And I've had a lot of coaches before him, and I still have coaches after him.
Yep.
And yet it was just, he was one that, man, if I could emulate a coaching style, I really liked that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you're describing, I've asked audiences this, I've asked the people that I've worked with this, I've asked my own mentors this, and they all give me similar fields of answers. It's like,
Mhm.
but it really boils down to the people in your life who didn't let you settle for anything less than you were capable of. And that to
100%.
me was like, wow, that's
Yeah.
100% true. And
Yeah.
so, now a good coach is going to do that in love.
Sure.
And when sometimes you get coaches that do it in anger, and they make you belittled, or they make you feel worse, and they motivate you negatively. And sometimes there's a place for that. But when you get a good coach who can deliver the hardest news possible with love attached to it, which it sounds like what, Chuck did that.
100%.
You said he cared
Yes.
about you more than he cared about the relationship. He cared about you, and he
Yeah.
cared about your growth, and he cared about what you wanted more than hurting your feelings. And
Right.
so there were probably times he said some things that were really uncomfortable.
Oh,
Um, knowing Chuck, I'm sure he did, but
yeah.
he cared about your growth more than he cared about making you uncomfortable. And that's so,
Yeah.
so to me, that's what coaching is about.
Yeah.
And it's about seeing, and also seeing in you sometimes what you can't see in yourself.
Mhm.
Sometimes
That's what
I
I was
know
going to
for
say.
me with coaches that I've had in the past, it's like, I don't believe I can do something or accomplish or experience or even become a certain version of who it is I'd ultimately like to. And a great coach will see pieces of that in me that I'm just incapable of seeing. And that could be for 1,000 reasons. It could be from a crappy childhood, or from a dysfunctional marriage, or because I just don't believe in myself. Whatever the reason is, a good coach can get to the heart of that and push you past it. So that's what I love about coaching.
Yeah.
Um, Now, when you combine that with a mastermind, for those of you that aren't familiar with a mastermind, this is the idea of a mastermind has been watered down over the years. Um, the original principle that I heard it from was in Think and Grow Rich, and it was basically a small group of people that get together where the rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
It's people who are on some sort of similar path, and they're all working towards a common, maybe not even a common goal, but a common theme. And the people lift each other up. So it's kind of like coaching almost on steroids, because you're in a group of your peers now instead of just somebody who's already been there and done that and can help bring you further. So one of the things that I do in our leadership boardroom groups is we have these small groups. There's no more than 15 people ever in our groups, and we get these 2-day mastermind retreats together. We do them 3 times a year, and 15 people come in from all over the country. And for 2 days, we have hot seat turns. I know you're familiar with this. You were in it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
each person gets about an hour in the hot seat. And so they get the opportunity to discuss openly whatever challenge they're facing right now, their biggest challenge that's inhibiting them from living their personal or their business vision. And then the other 14 people in the room during that person's time now become the board of directors. And so those 14 people become the coach for an hour of you. And they go, Dustin, hold on a second. You just said, you know, some ridiculous word multiple times. Did you even hear you say that? I just heard you don't believe in yourself enough to pull it off. I just heard that you just don't have enough training. I heard this challenge, and I've already have the solution to that challenge. Let me tell you how I fixed it. And it's just a group of smart people coming together that also, like a coach, care about each other enough to say what needs to be said, and bring each other forward. So that's when, person one might take their turn. The other 14 in the room are the board of directors. And then we move to person two. And now person one gets to become the coach and the board of
Yeah.
directors. And so we do that over the course of 2 days. And it's a really powerful thing, especially if you can get people in the room that are on a similar trajectory. And from a business perspective, if you can get people who are on similar business paths and experiences, it's really powerful. Now, if I put the $500 million guy in the same room as a guy who just started his business 2 days ago, now we got a challenge, because $500 million
Right.
guy ends up being the coach of the entire room. So I got to figure out how to put the right people in the right room with the right coach and all that stuff. But if you get it, it's a powerful thing that goes far beyond the power of just coaching. Because if a coach tells you one thing, one observation that he or she's seen, you can combat me. But if 14 people in the room see the
True.
same thing, good luck arguing that one.
Yeah, so
So
true.
I use a combination of both of those because I've found that both of those are more effective than just one.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you got a lot out of that. So if you've never experienced, like I said, coaching or masterminds and or both, please lean into that. There's a lot of out of there for a lot of industries. Yeah, please lean into that because that personal growth will really help. Last question.
Okay.
Well, besides the Bible, because I know your faith journey, what is the one book that has had the most, whatever word I'm looking for, in your life?
How to
Most
Win
of
Friends and Influence People.
Really? Okay.
You ever read that?
I have a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I've probably read it 7 or 8 times over the years. A buddy of mine introduced that to me when I was 19 years old. And what I love about it is it teaches you how to deliver a message in a way that the recipient's ears can hear it.
Mm.
And because you know how it is, man, you can say the same thing 2 different ways, and one way it's heard and the other way it's not. And so to me, the single biggest thing that you can master, I try to teach my kids this. They're young enough where they're just starting to get it. But I try to teach them, man, the single biggest skill that you can master is how to communicate. If you can do that, there's not a lot you can't do. If you can communicate effectively and in a way that not just inspires people, but gives them hope and sort of brings all of them together, you got a superpower. And if you don't, you can have the best product, service, anything in the world, and you'll screw it up. You know, your
Mm.
marriage, for example, it's only as good as you can communicate. Your friendships, you know, if you can't communicate, you're going to have some challenges there. Your business, if you can't communicate, you're not selling anything. And so I love the book for that reason. It encompasses so many things. And I love all the stories that are in it and everything else.
Well, I'm going to have to go reread that book from that, I guess, point of view now.
Yeah.
Because I will say, for everyone who's listening, and he may or may not, because he's going to be a humble guy, Shaun is by far one of the best communicators I've ever seen from stage.
Oh, thanks.
And you get people to hear you. And I've seen you on stage a lot, and you can definitely do that. So now I have to go back and read that book from that kind of point of view. Because if it's just one book, no.
It's crazy too. I've read it multiple times as I've gotten older, and I hear it different ways. Every time I read it, I'm like, I don't even remember reading this whole section before, but it strikes me some, you know how it is when you
Yeah,
read a good book. Yeah, go read it
that's
again. It's
awesome.
good.
I will. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Again, go back and re-listen to this. Like I know I will, because anytime I listen to Shaun speak, I get some nuggets out of this. Where I will get those forms that Shaun talked about, that wheel, and make sure that I share that to our private Facebook group at the Balanced Business Dad, or you can go to dadupgroup.com and just join it right then and there. Shaun, again, thank you so much. Very, very honored to have you on here. And dads, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.